Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Whip thwip, bitches.
Thwip thwip bitches indeed. And Frank Visani. How you doing, Frank?
Second time's the charm.
Second time's the charm
Doing
indeed.
good.
Excellent. Yeah, we got through that intro the first time, and Frank came across as a robot. Apologies in advance for any potential audio wonkiness this time. Frank is actually traveling. He's actually over here in Arizona, which means he didn't have like all of his equipment. So we're kind of he's just kind of like using Discord on his phone this week, and we're gonna try and do our best to navigate that. But on the plus side, that means the three of us all got to do a fun like That Nerdy Site movie day where we went and saw Spider-Man today. Spider-Man No Way Home. That was incredibly fun getting to see you guys and enjoy this movie together. It was my third time seeing it here on this Sunday morning. Both your guys' first times, right?
Yep.
Same for you, Cam.
When was the second time that you saw it?
I saw it Thursday, and then I saw it again Friday night.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you watched it like, yeah, okay, all right.
Yep. Yeah, Frank.
It is funny as somebody who came from Austin and then flew into Phoenix. Like apparently showings here are way more abundant because I was talking to my friend back home after I got out the theater, and he's like, "I looked for all day showings. It's not anywhere in town." So well, it's there. I'm sorry, but all the seats are sold. So it's basically in Austin. It's like all the tickets are sold all over town. But here you can just walk in and go to like any showing. So I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it was definitely the first two times, like the evening shows that I went to, it was pretty packed houses. It was pretty this was easily the lightest of the bunch at our 9:40 showing on a Sunday morning, and that doesn't surprise me too much. Morning on a Sunday, not everybody, especially for like not everybody getting back out to the movies yet. Although the movie seems to be on track to break 200 million opening weekend, so shout out to Spider-Man, kind of working to bring back movie theaters. But yes, today's episode is going to be all about Spider-Man No Way Home. We'll do, as we typically do on these kinds of things, kind of our spoiler-free review and impressions first, and then we will dive into with clearly delineated spoiler talk for the rest of the episode. So please enjoy that. A little bit of housekeeping before we start, though. If you like what you hear, please remember to subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can. Apparently, Spotify now has like ratings that you can do. So if you're one of the few people that listen to us on Spotify, feel free to go ahead and review us and give us 5 stars on Spotify. That'd be super cool to help us with whatever algorithms are getting us in people's ears. So yeah. Let us kick it right off with our spoiler-free thoughts of Spider-Man No Way Home. So, Cameron, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home?
The emphasis is because I necessitated an edit. My bad. But yeah, I think this movie is incredible. I think that it's absolutely like spectacular. It's amazing. It's stupendous and superior. Those are all lines of Spider-Man comics.
I didn't know a stupendous existed, but I caught all the
other
ones.
It probably doesn't. I just threw it in there because I was like, well, it might exist somewhere. They might have done like a short limited line of that.
Sure.
Why not? Spider-Man prints money for Marvel. So of course they would. But yeah, when it comes to this film, I honestly think that the best thing you can do is just go out and watch it. Don't listen to anything on the internet. If you got spoiled, doesn't matter. Go watch it anyway. Like it really is so great that even if something has been spoiled for you, it's still worth watching. I'm saying that because of all the preference, like all the like people talking about seeing spoilers online. It won't ruin the movie. This movie is spectacular from top to finish. It deals with the fallout of Far From Home in the perfect way. And it's just like it just deals with it and deals with everything in such a great way. I can't recommend it enough. It is potentially the best, if not like it's one of the best, if not the best Marvel movie we've gotten so far.
All right, Frank, give me your spoiler-free thoughts on Spider-Man.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. And I kind of texted it to one of my friends on the way back from the theater. But I was like, honestly, I think this is like my favorite superhero movie I've ever seen. And like, we've seen them all pretty much just like you guys have. But this is like so far and away amazing. And it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of built off of like all these other MCU movies and all these other like, amazing other movies that have come before it. But I still think it's honestly, even on its own, I think it'll probably stand up as just being like one of the better Spider-Man and superhero movies that have come out. And I especially think, like Cam said, I think everybody should really go see it, especially if you do like Spider-Man. Like, I love that character and I've grown up with him. So it's like, I love everything they've kind of done with him here, especially because it's like this gigantic celebration of Spider-Man and Marvel and like all these great things that we love.
Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, this is my third time seeing it. And I'm still like finding new fun things each time I see it. And I agree that even if elements of this movie get spoiled for you or something like that, it's still worth seeing because this is one of those, like, the epitome of, I often think, like, I'm not a huge, like, oh, spoilers are terrible or whatever, because a spoiler is a moment in a movie or something like that. It is like a thing, and this movie is so much more about like the journey and getting to, and the how and the why of all of the things that are happening in this movie. And even if like a tweet sized, like, this is a thing that's in the movie, like that's not going to capture everything surrounding that element in the movie and the feelings that you're going to get when you see it kind of play out and stuff like that. That said, I also think that this is going to be an incredible movie for people to see, like, for people to be introduced to years down the line, when like they're so far removed from like the news surrounding this movie, because obviously, like, we've all heard casting rumors and stuff like that for a couple years now. And I liken it to the first time I saw Star Wars when I was, in the early 90s or something, when I was a kid, not knowing the big like twists and turns of that original trilogy, because like I hadn't been exposed to it yet or something like that. So like families introducing like the next generation of Marvel fans and stuff to Spider-Man over the years, and then getting to this movie, is going to be such a wonderful, like, holy crap. I mean, it's a wonderful holy crap they did it for us, knowing a lot of the things that we knew going into this. But I think when you're like completely outside of that bubble of kind of expectation, it's going to be even more incredible, even more amazing. And yeah, I very much enjoy it. I think it is a wonderful, like, culmination of not only the MCU, not only like the Spider-Verse, but just like this renaissance of like Marvel movies in general. I know I watched kind of the kind of funny conversation around this movie, and Tim Geddes highlighted, and this is not a spoiler because it's obviously in the trailers and stuff, but like, even this big climactic battle happening at the Statue of Liberty harkens back to that first X-Men movie that we got like in this millennia. So I think there's just like a wonderful like love and and honoring of almost everything that came before it, that leads up to this point, in a way that this, like, I mean, yeah, like you said, Cam, like, so much of this shouldn't work, but it does, and it's so fun and joyous to see. I mean, some of the funnest bits of the movie for me today were knowing what was coming and getting to like see you guys react to those big moments and those fun things, and just seeing what you laughed at or what you responded to versus like what I had or what other audiences had and stuff like that. So absolutely a very, very fun time. Highly recommend as well. I mean, obviously I've seen it 3 times and am continually eager to see it moving forward. So yeah, I think that'll do it for our spoiler-free thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. A resounding like recommendation and success from all of us. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So with that, now, Cameron, I will throw it to you for spoiler-filled impressions. So once again, we're gonna go dive into spoilers, and there are a ton of things that can be spoiled in this movie that still hadn't been, like, in the marketing material and
Oh
stuff like
yeah.
that. So, yeah, if you have not seen it yet and spoilers are a thing that bothers you, feel free to step away, come back, and we will be here to discuss. But with that out of the way, Cam, hit me with the analogy you told us earlier that you wanted to cut or that we had to cut because it was
Yeah.
a little spoiler filly.
Honestly, this is like an 8-year-old's dream, like about playing with your action figures come to life in the best way possible. Like it's like you have an 8-year-old who's like, yeah, I love Spider-Man. I like the Tom Holland movies, but then I also like, there's Spider-Man too. But then there's also like my dad's Spider-Man movies. I want to watch those are cool too. I want them all in a movie. And I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And it's like the kid playing with Legos in the Lego movie. Like I'm gonna take all the superheroes and all the fantasy people and all the other stuff and just throw them all together. And it shouldn't work, but it does. And it works so spectacularly in a way that there is just like this movie is chaos. Like it is chaotic throughout the entire film, but the chaos is so steered and driven. It's like a raging river, even though it's a roaring, raging river that's, dangerous and scary, it's still guided through the path that it's on. And it does that so well. And it hits so many different emotional beats that just resonated with me on so many different levels. And getting to see the Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got that moment into the Spider-Verse, which honestly, I'm going to be spending a lot of time comparing and contrasting these two films to decide which is my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time now.
Mm-hmm.
My knee-jerk reaction is still to say Spider-Verse, but there's so much that this film does in the live action sense that I just think is just absolutely spectacular, and I can't even imagine. Like this is going to be a debate going forward, which is the best Spider-Man movie.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to be like, well, the best live action Spider-Man movie is this, but the best Spider-Man movie is Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
I can see people saying that all the time. That just might end up being, I said that very snooty. That might end up being my opinion.
I was going to say,
that could be it.
That's where I'm currently sitting with it, but without like the pretentiousness. Like,
yeah, because I said that.
I think this is
that.
absolutely a phenomenal live action, and it does a great job of bringing all of the like I have my issues with some of the other Spider-Man movies, but this does a great job of not dismissing those issues, but like embracing them and bringing them into the fold and improving upon them. But I think like my personal thoughts are still as a standalone thing. I think Spider-Verse, which admittedly Spider-Verse also like gleans things from these other Spider-Man movies as well. But I still like it. There's like no beats or no moments in Spider-Verse that I feel like anything ever dips, whereas there are a few things in here where I'm like, it's a cool moment, but it could have been better, or it could have been more, or something like that. But yeah, it's absolutely a wonderful, like, I mean, it's like, shout out to Spider-Verses, because this is effectively another one. But this is the live action version of that. Frank, how about you?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you guys there, and because I think I love so much about the movie, but that is definitely, I think, one of the best parts about it is just bringing all of the Spider-Men together, and all of the ways they interact with each other. Like, not only are they quipping with each other, they're like talking about like their previous things of like losses and tragedies, and like, what, oh, Uncle Ben said this to me, and this is my universe, and like kind of like a lot of the comparisons you guys made, like we got some of that in Spider-Verse, but I think it's done like so well here. And it's cool that it's also done like differently. Like I can kind of see where they kind of got some ideas or kind of went with some things. And I don't know if we'd get this movie if Spider-Verse didn't just like explode and blow up. And maybe because they were going with kind of the multiverse anyways, but I think Spider-Verse is like a huge reason why they decided like maybe we can make this happen in live action and kind of just do something crazy. But I'm glad they did it, because like one of those things that I was upset about before was like, they're setting up the Sinister Six in each Spider-Man trilogy, but they could never get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like each person is trying to get to the Sinister Six, and they could never do it. And it's so amazing to just get to the point where it's the Sinister Six, but it's all of their universes, and they're all coming together. And I love the way they're all like updated and modern, and it's even the way that their like suits work and their designs, and then even the way that like I love the way that they like talk to each other and work with each other. Where like these are human beings, these are people. They're not just like monsters, you know. And then even Norman when he has like the flip into Goblin, like I like that they're all just kind of like normal people. Like, and I'm glad to see all these characters with these like rich histories come together, and we don't have to watch like a 5 hour movie where they explain everybody in the same movie. It's like Lizard just shows up and we're like, yeah, it's Kirk Connors, and you just move on, you know?
Yeah.
Like they're like, hey, is he a dinosaur? Like,
Yeah,
I will say that was one of my favorite parts was when the Lizard actually speaks, and like because Electro just goes, "Yeah, no, that's Dr. Connors. We used to work together at Oscorp." Yeah, until he turned himself into a lizard, and then tried to turn all of New York into lizards. And everybody's like, "Wait, what?" And then Connors like, "It was the next stage of evolution," and everybody's like, "What the
yeah,
like?" What is going on? The Lizard's Knock, the Wizard's Dungeon part. Oh my gosh.
yeah. I mean, that's like,
well, I love that because that's when I'm like, yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 1 is weird as hell. Like, I'm like, thanks for calling that out.
yeah, it's, I mean, like the banter among all of the characters and like the characters that knew each other versus the characters that didn't, but like still like I love, yeah, I love the scene between Electro and Sandman of like, yeah, I fell into a vat of electric eels. I fell into a super collider. Got to be careful where you fall, man.
Yep.
Like the origin stories and
Do you
the
think they
absurdity of that. Yep. What were you saying, Trey?
sorry, I was going to throw in. Do you think they wrote that? Do you think they wrote that before or after the Suicide Squad thing with Peacemaker and Idris Elba? Like, do you think that somebody like? Do you think they already had that in the film, or do you think somebody was like, "Hey, we could do something like that"?
Oh, I definitely think like if anything, like the Peacemaker and I forgot what his Bloodsport,
Was
like
it Bloodshot?
yeah,
Bloodsport. That
Bloodsport, I
is.
think.
Bloodsport.
Yeah,
Bloodsport.
like their banter was like the most Marvel aspect of that movie because that's just not what I typically associate with DC. Whereas like this, I felt like so much of this was just like the Marvel quips and everybody quipping with one another, which you know is admittedly sometimes a minor flaw of the Marvel in that everybody's quippy, so like if everybody's quippy nobody's quippy or whatever, but like the banter that so many of these characters got to have with one another, and then especially the banter that all the Spider-Men got to have, Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland being like amazed and curious about Tobey Maguire's like webbing, and
That was so
how
good.
that
Oh
works.
my gosh.
Was, a lovely little bit.
Hey, like my favorite part was like if it's private, like that's fine. Like you don't have to tell us. It's not private. Like, but have you ever had web blockage? Yeah, I had like
Yeah.
like in like a what does he say? It
Yeah,
was
like
a
existential crisis kind of thing, and everybody's like, "Oh, I get that." Yeah, no,
I get that. And it's
yeah.
like and it's like, but does it just come out of your wrists or does it come out of other places?
It's like just my
Just my
wrist.
wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just my wrist,
yeah.
guys.
Like so much of that
I
was so like just lovely and wonderful, and getting like these three eras of Spider-Man, and they got to basically play like their own eras. Like you get that that the original Tobey Maguire is like he's basically the Peter B. Parker, but like not run down hobo Spider-Man kind of thing. He's just like he's older. He's been through this. He knows and can kind of like impart that wisdom to our very young Spider-Man. And then like Andrew Garfield gets the like the in between, but also the like he failed with Gwen Stacy, and that has lived with him and sat with him. And
Dude, his redemptive moment when he saves MJ is so fucking good.
I mean, like we'll talk about it when we kind of dive into like the what's like what we think is next for the MCU or or the Sonyverse. But like, I mean, just I was thinking about it especially today, rewatching it. Like, I think they've kind of talked about like, hey, we have like three more, like we have another trilogy lined up, and I almost want it to be Spider-Man 4, The Amazing Spider-Man 3, and Spider-Man Home Sweet Home or something like that, where it's like
Home Sweet Home, that's perfect.
we get another Tobey movie, we get another Andrew Garfield movie, and we get another Tom Holland movie. And this movie made me want like more from each of them, especially Andrew Garfield. He's been having a great like run of things in general. Like he's one of my favorite performances of the year in Tick Tick Boom. And so yeah, like the 1-2 punch of him in that and then in this, and getting that like you seeing how that has affected him, and yeah, him getting that wonderful moment with MJ, and like it was one of those things like if you knew that these characters were going to be in it and you'd seen that in the trailers, you could kind of have guessed that he was going to be the one to save the day and somehow like get that moment. And even knowing that or highly suspecting that, seeing it still the third time today, I was tearing up in the theater, and just loving everything because like it's right there on his face, it's on MJ's face, and because she like heard him say this story early, like she knows exactly what he's going through, and I love that like check in with like her saying to him, "Are you okay?" Because yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like so lovely, and he in particular, I think, just has so much fun. Like him being the first one that kind of gets introduced into this, and the back and forth that he has
Prove it.
with MJ and Ned, and yeah, he just kind of like hangs from the ceiling with like one hand. He's like, "This is enough." Like, or I have the tingle thing, just not for bread. Like so many just great moments, and then going and dusting off the cobweb kind of thing
so good.
for the Nana.
Oh, so good, Lola. Yeah. No, I will say like when Tobey Maguire showed up, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, it's happening, but it's really, really happening.
Mhm.
And to see, like, first off, the fact that they had great on-screen chemistry alone was great and
Mhm.
phenomenal. But also on top of that, you just had like seeing like Andrew, it's like it's very obvious Andrew's like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is Spider-Man all the time. That's why he's in the suit.
Mhm.
But for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, when he's in there and he's like, yeah, like we had some hard times, but we've mostly figured it out now. And he just goes, how did you figure it out? He goes, you just like, you got to try, you got to go out there, you got to make it, like, you have to put in the effort.
I mean, he says none of that. You're putting all of that into like
sorry, you're right.
his subtext.
I did.
But I love it.
He just
Yeah.
says, we made it. Yeah.
Between the lines.
Yeah. He's like,
yeah.
he basically says it's complicated. And then Andrew Garfield's like, yeah, I guess there's just not room for like, that for people like us. And Toby basically says like, me and my MJ made it work kind of thing. And it's a lovely little moment, but like, yeah, it does have a lot of that, like those layers and subtext underneath it.
Because he thinks that it's complicated means, oh, you're just like me. And it's like, no, dude, like you can make it work. It's just, it's complicated. Like it doesn't, like, it's not an easy thing. You don't like Spider-Man doesn't get to have an easy life. That's just the rules. That's the rules of any Spider-Verse. He doesn't get to have an easy life. It's like we said at the beginning, I'm the most famous person in the world and I'm still broke.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love, like, but the way Tom Holland, when he realizes not only am I not alone in this, but like these are the, like I have my own pack. And then it's like I love that Tom has that like I'm Peter 1. Like not your Peter 1, like meta subtext. It's like I'm here, this is my universe. I'm Peter 1, you're Peter 2, you're Peter 3, and
Peter 3.
Peter 3, okay. Let's do it. Like it's they're not only their banter, but like their kindness to each other, their sincerity. When Peter is on his last legs of anything and just like is barely keeping himself together, and the people that show up aren't the heroes he's looked up to. It isn't that, once again, and in a weird way, in the first two films, I often say one of my favorite things is when Peter is at a crossroads and he's struggling, he doesn't have a moment of a flashback or a callback or like the ghost uncle in the car scene. He doesn't have those. He has like these moments of self-reflection internally, and he internally does all of that stuff, but it's done like without dialogue, and it's very powerful moments with Tom Holland as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. In this one, he can't do it. And so his other selves come and help him through it instead. And in a way, he still is helping himself in that moment, but it is like the other versions of himself. And to me, that is just like such a great way of inverting your storytelling in such a cool way, that I love it. Like, I love it. There's so much about this film, like, that I just adore and love. But we have a program we should probably stick to, at least as far as like segments go, because I think I've immediately derailed that.
Oh, it's quite all right. I throw those out there as like suggestions and kind of like guidelines to remember, like these are the things I really want us to like hit on, but I'm letting the conversation go wherever it wants to go. Frank, I want to throw it to you though. What other surprises like got you in this movie? Obviously, we've talked about like the Andrew Garfield and the Tobey Maguire ness of it. What other things like happened or popped up or like the yeah, I guess what anything else like grabbed your attention in this that was like that was really cool. That was a really fun beat.
I love a lot of the small references. Like, there's a lot of really small things to like their universes, and even just things that people do and say, and then even like jokes that people will make that I appreciate. And one of those that I thought did really well was like when Norman Osborn is in their apartment, and I kind of missed part of that scene, but the part I did catch, I really liked, where he's like, "I don't have a whole, like somebody else lives in my place. Oscorp doesn't exist." Like, I really liked the way that like some of the people who came into this universe were like struggling with the fact that they are in like a totally different universe, and it's almost kind of like similar to the blip, like when people came back and you
Mm-hmm.
went back to your house and like somebody was just there now, but like you're just in a completely different place with no one else you know, and then even people who like you may know, but it's a different person, literally. You know, like Peter Parker's here, but it's a totally different Peter Parker that he doesn't even know. And like I
Yeah.
thought that was super cool.
Yeah, that was yeah, you I think you ran to the restroom or something for right around that. It wasn't it wasn't their apartment. It was like he showed up at a feast center that Aunt May was working at because he had seen an ad of Spider-Man like tied to Feast or whatever, which obviously like we have kind of a precedent for from Far From Home, where like Spider-Man's, doing the neighborhood, like going out there and talking to the people who had come back from the blip and stuff. So yeah, like he shows up, it's like effectively like at a homeless shelter. And it's a fun, like that's what makes Norman realize that this is a very different like world. And the duality of Norman versus Green Goblin or whatever, like that's is he playing Norman in that scene, but he's really still the Green Goblin, or like to what degree is that going on? I like I I give the nod to the fact that like in the background while um Tom Holland and Aunt May are having like their conversation about what to do with him, he's grabbing donuts and like pocketing donuts in his sweatshirt because like he very much feels like he's a man out of like his element. And so it strikes me as like oh, that's Norman shining through
Mhm.
more than like the Green Goblin. But shout out to Willem Dafoe, who just like
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
like kills returning it to it. And shout out to the decision to I mean it's effectively a nod to Spider-Man No More, but like the sequence kind of early on when he basically like shatters the Green Goblin mask, like we get to see Willem Dafoe's face because that's far creepier than the Goblin mask anyway.
Yeah.
For so much of this.
I,
The what I love about
I,
it though is there's so many hints and clues that when the Goblin returns, you
Oh
know
yeah.
immediately that the
Yep.
Goblin returns, and it's not just a we're gods, that part. It's before that. It's when they're working on the science,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you see the mania switch on, and nobody else notices,
Yeah.
and it's so good because he's keeping himself so under control,
Mm-hmm.
but he's doing little manic things throughout those entire scenes, whether it's like writing down formulas over and over again. um and it's wild. And then he like, I love that. I loved that when it's like, oh, it's like, oh, the Goblin's back again,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody noticed it. But he's just such an amazing actor. Him, I can't remember his name off the top of my head because it's getting mixed up with a bunch of other names. But the guy who plays Doc Ock,
Alfred Molina. Yeah.
oh,
thank you. There was a bunch of I played Hitman 3. I beat Hitman 3 over the last 2 days. So a lot of like names are like tossed around in my head right now.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Because Alfred Molina, if you said Alfred Molina, the target from Hitman 3, I'd believe you.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a Hitman 3 contract name.
Yeah.
Just European enough.
Mm-hmm.
But Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, like spectacular performance, Spider-Man 2 makes that movie. And comes in and as the first one to show up and the first one to realize you're not Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Like that amazing moment, the nanomachines and everything about his character, and also him being the first one that's helped.
Mm-hmm.
And like given his life back and getting that moment where he just says, "It's so quiet."
Yeah.
Like, oh, this man has literally been, because he has been fully conscious for everything he's doing, but he has been surrounded by so many different voices, so many, like the volume and the number of voices alone have driven him mad and insane. And for him to come back from that, I loved, because we get to see old Doc Ock, but it's like old Doc Ock, but I still have the legs, and now I'm doing the crazy stuff with him still.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Yeah, I totally love that too, and that was even going to be one of the things I wanted to pivot into and mention too. Is like, because I love that kind of the subversion with this, almost of like, okay, he's defeated the enemies in the past and even killed some of them in some of the other movies, but this is like, we have to cure and help all of them. Like, we're going to help because that's kind of what Cam is talking about, where they kind of mixed it up and kind of changed some of the things that they normally do in kind of a cool way. I think that's kind of another cool thing they did, where it's like, no, we got to help everybody. And then even the older Spider-Man kind of had that thing of like, they're almost like making up for their past sins. Like, there's a lot of redemptions in this movie that I think they're really awesome for, like a lot of heroes, a lot of the Spider-Man. Like, everybody gets like a really awesome redemption. Even Peter Parker 1 kind of even gets a little bit at the end, even though he has like a sad ending,
Mm-hmm.
It's a heroic, though. Like, that's kind of like the difference between the sad endings in other movies, like the other Spider-Man's movies. The is tragic. Like Spider-Man 1, like the first Spider-Man movies, they all take place in graveyards at the end. Like, every ending is at a graveyard. But the thing I want to touch on, though, is it's not just like redemption for like the villains and heroes, and it's also like, I love that idea. So that's what I want to touch on. The idea that it's a redemption for Peter, like for Andrew and Toby's Spider-Man, is amazing. To look at it, like, they did not kill anybody, but their act, like Toby was about to be murdered himself, and all he did was backflip to avoid the glider. And then Doc Ock sacrificed his own life to save all of New York. Like, that was, to me, that will always remain, like, I'm like, Doc Ock died a hero in Spider-Man 2, saving, like, trying to make up for the wrongs he had done. And so in my mind, like, he wasn't really needing of redemption. And so him coming in as an ally at the end felt like good. Like, we solved the problem of like what was driving him nuts. He already died a hero, like saving all of New York from his super collider. And oh my gosh, when he holds the Iron Man thing and he says, "The power of the sun and the palm of your hand."
Mm-hmm.
And like that like Toby meeting with him,
like,
like,
Toby finishes it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of those great like callbacks, obviously, to the early movies, like the I'm something of a scientist myself was a great loved
Incredible.
hearing you guys on that one. I also want to speaking of that, like, another one of my favorite moments of just like getting to enjoy you guys react to it was the Daredevil reveal, or the Matt
Oh
Murdock
my gosh,
reveal.
Matt Murdock is in
Oh
the
my
MCU
God,
for
I
real.
almost
It's
forgot he was in
happening.
there.
Yeah, it was.
I flipped
I
when
was
that happened, man.
like, at when it was coming up, I looked over and like, Frank, you were like writing I think you were like asking for like another
Yeah.
coffee or something like that, and so I was just like, God, stop. Just look at the movie, like look up, and then like I think Cameron reacted, and that got you to like look up and see and react as well, and I love that bit, and it's one of those, like, that's what, like, when I talk about earlier how like I think Spider-Verse has like moments that are great and fleshed out. Like, this is one, like, it's a fun little moment, but like I wanted more of it. Like the fact that Matt Murdock's in that scene and then like gone from the rest of the movie. I was like, oh, like,
Sad.
it's
Sad.
great, and he gets like a great moment, and it is a great, like, lovely confirmation that he is going to
Early Fox,
continue
yeah.
on in the MCU, hopefully in some form or other, maybe in the next Spider-Man movie or something like that. But like, we get the introduction of him, we get him doing the cool, like, catching the brick out of midair, and like
Spider-Man sensed it before Peter sensed it. Yeah.
yeah, and
Like,
And
So good.
yeah, and Peter being like, "How'd you do that?" I'm a good lawyer. I'm a very good lawyer.
It was listen, I'm a very good lawyer.
Hmm.
And then the brick gets thrown, he catches, he goes, "How'd you do that?"
Well,
I'm a damn good lawyer.
yeah, it was because he says to Happy, he's like, "You're gonna need a very good lawyer," or something like that. And then the brick happens, he catches it. I'm a very good lawyer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Peter, because you're my like all this stuff. We're like you're not gonna have to worry about going to prison. You're fine.
Mhm.
But the court of public opinion is another thing.
Yeah.
And then Happy goes, "Oh, that's great to hear." He goes, now you, Mister Hogan," and he just like says what he's done. He goes, "You're gonna need a damn good lawyer."
Yeah. So
So
yeah,
poor Happy.
I love that scene. That was one of those like to a degree I'd been spoiled on that. Like I'd seen images and stuff online beforehand, but it was still like in the moment seeing that pop up, seeing him like confirmed in there. It was lovely. And yeah, shout out to Charlie Cox. Always lovely seeing him pop up in these things. And like it sets a great tone for what else is to come. Like because I like he's effectively like the first crossover character that we get in this movie. Because we get him, I think we get him like effectively before Peter does any of the Doctor Strange stuff too. So yeah, it's like he's the first guy we get. And then it just kind of sets like obviously he does the magic thing with Peter or with the Doctor Strange. That then like brings in all these other characters and stuff.
Oh my gosh, Wong being revealed as the new Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there was a technicality where I was
I was blipped away for 5 years. So yeah,
so he's technically Sorcerer Supreme right now.
Mhm.
It's like so great. And then when he goes like, there's no time. It's like, yeah, Doctor Strange is just another sorcerer now, which is cool because it's like a different phase of his like thing. Like, oh, you're not in charge of the organization. Wong is in charge of the organization. And it makes sense why in Shang-Chi he is just so exhausted all the time.
Well, he's also going to underground fight rings. So.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. It's like that's crazy that he's the Sorcerer Supreme going and doing that.
I love
he's drinking all night doing karaoke.
It's
that's
also
why he's exhausted.
Yeah, there you go. It also, and like I remember thinking this the first time around, but then it just popped back in my head as we're talking about it now. It also confirms I think he was like one of the last ones of like we didn't know his blip status, and so the fact that like now this confirms that Wong was still like around during the blip is a fun little bit.
Oh, I just realized something in my head. I just like but I've lost it now. Shoot, sorry about that. It was on the tip of my tongue and now it's like gone, blipped out of existence.
Yeah.
No, it was about Wong. So that's what this is it. So it felt when Peter goes into the Sanctum Sanctorum and goes in and Wong is like leaving, it felt so much like he was going to see his cool friend, like his cool friend who's a little bit older than him. As like a mentor, like a mentor teen, like older mentor teen, like Peter's a freshman, Doctor Strange is a senior, and Wong is Doctor Strange's parent saying like no parties, like no parties this weekend, and then like the dad like at the end being like no parties, wink, leave me out of it, like and then like leaves. I'm like that felt like such like a weird like teen movie moment, especially because Doctor Strange now is just like super chill, which is cool.
I mean, he's in sweats there in the like because they had a portal opened to Siberia and a blizzard came through, so he's keeping himself warm.
Because somebody forgot to check the wards. Checking the wards is beneath the position of
yeah. I love the little banter they have. It leaves me excited again for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which also like obviously the post credits thing being just a trailer for that movie was like a fun, like we don't get a ton of those kinds of things these days. Like normally we would have had that trailer months ago or something like that for the lead up to Doctor Strange, and so the fact that it's like only, and they still haven't like put it online, it's only at the end of this movie so far, it's like that's really cool.
That's what I thought the coolest part about that was because like it's a really 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 cool trailer anyways, but the fact that came on, I was totally surprised and I had no idea, and I just thought it was going to be another Tom Hardy thing. So when it's this really amazing trailer, and I was like, I'm just amazed that this trailer wasn't uploaded like that night. Like,
Yeah.
okay, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, like out there like the next day. So I'm glad they were able to keep that under wraps for like a while, because I think that's one of the coolest surprises of this movie, that is full of amazing surprises, and
Yeah.
they like somehow snuck another one in at the end.
Yeah, it reminds me of like seeing Back to the Future 2 the first time, and like the end of that is a trailer for Back to the Future Part 3. And it's like I mean, like, especially back then, since I'm, I was alive at the time, being like, and that's coming out in like 6 months. Oh, that's really awesome. And they're going to the Wild West and that stuff. So like getting to see like this movie's done and here's what's next, is a lovely kind of like treat that they've done like once or twice before. Like I remember they did it in the lead up to Avengers, like they do it at the end of Captain America, the first Avenger. It's kind of like a trailer for the Avengers. And then I think like Ant-Man, you get that scene from Civil War with like
Mhm.
Captain and Winter Soldier. But yeah, so
Also,
much.
shout out to Rogers the Musical's billboards everywhere.
Yeah, exactly, the Hawkeye tie-ins there, like right at the top of the movie, because obviously it is set in, the holiday time. In Hawkeye, they've been kind of they kind of dropped the at some point they drop like the fact that the Statue of Liberty is getting like, redecorated or redone, which obviously we get to see in its full glory here. Just like lovely little crossover elements of the shows and the movies, and just the timeline of everything is a ton of fun, I think. um yeah, and obviously like this is set around the holidays, that one set the week of Christmas or whatever. So yeah, lovely little tie-ins there. Since you mentioned it, we like we'll talk about it now. The mid credits scene there being kind of the payoff to the Venom Let There Be Carnage end credits tag of Tom Hardy and Venom blipping over into this universe. They're like the idea of them talking there, getting familiarized, getting acquainted with all the super people in this universe. Um, from Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso, for those that enjoy
Danny
that show.
Rojas.
Yeah, football is life.
Danny Rojas. Football is life.
And then like immediately gets like the events of this movie happen and he goes back to his, his original world. There's like definitely a whole bunch of like that doesn't make sense within the logic that they've set up. Like he didn't know that Spider-Man was Peter Parker. But who cares? It leaves
Well,
a
he
little bit
did
of the
technically,
symbiote.
because he saw the J. Jonah Jameson broadcast, but like he didn't know Peter Parker personally, but he knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Like he saw Tom Holland's face on the TV.
But like how did he see that broadcast from his universe would be the question. Like
Trevor,
exactly,
everything
like
in Venom 2 already doesn't make sense.
exactly.
Like you just load
Yeah,
that in it.
yeah.
The
Like
important
there
thing is we have the symbiote in our in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now,
yeah.
and we can have a good Venom movie.
They're like
That being said, can we talk about Flash Thompson's hair?
sure. How you
The
just like the
blonde,
bleach blonde, yeah.
the bleach blonde. His book, oh my gosh.
Flashpoint, yeah. Tony
I love
Revolori doesn't
his
get a
whole
ton
sales
to
pitch
do in
on
these
it.
movies, but he's always a little fun. What'd you say there, Frank?
Sorry, I just love going off the book. I love his whole sales pitch on it. That
Mm-hmm.
he has like the whole pitch already ready to go, and he's just like telling that to people on the street. And then the MIT lady has his book like in the
Yeah.
car. Like he's just been giving out copies.
Yeah. And I'm very curious what the spell at the end does to that book and slash does to like Flash, because it's one of those things, like much like the blip, they're not going to probably ever get into like the mechanics of like what this really did for people or anything like that. But I like in my mind, it's people know Spider-Man and people know Spider-Man was part of the Avengers and stuff. They just never knew that he was Peter Parker. So like any mention of like anytime anybody would have mentioned Peter Parker or something, they just would have said Spider-Man instead. And so I'm like, so how does that work for Flash, who wrote an entire book about how he knows, Peter Parker or something like that? Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
It would be really funny if it just got flipped where like it's still just a book about how he knows Peter Parker, but nobody gives a shit who Peter Parker is anymore. So like the book is still just out there, but
And
it's
when they
just
ask
about his
about it,
friend
so
Peter.
this is about your friend Peter Parker. I don't know anybody named Peter Parker. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also
yeah. And
this,
then he
but
has no idea.
that also means there's no such thing as penis Parker anymore.
True. Yeah.
Shout out to that Flash Thompson, like making that a chant in while he's DJing in Homecoming.
Yeah.
Top tier scene. Like I love that. Like Flash Thompson's always been, in my opinion, a underrated piece of the Spider-Man canon. Like he is such like, because the dichotomy of him being Peter Parker's constant bully and just absolutely spending all of his time shitting on Peter Parker, while at the same time idolizing Spider-Man to the degree that he does. He's like, where like when like in the comics, whenever everybody's turned against Spider-Man, the one person who stood by Spider-Man's side, no matter what, has always been Flash Thompson. And to the point where like it's crazy. Like to the point where like he got angry at Peter for selling pictures of Spider-Man to J. Jonah Jameson for J. Jonah Jameson to use. Like that's been a plot point before.
Yeah.
And so like I love that they've totally played into it by like what is the jock football player at a magnet school? And the answer is what Flash Thompson is.
Yeah.
He DJs, drives his dad's BMW. He's a douche. But he also is like a massive Spider-Man fanboy, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I love
now that he
yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Sorry, I just wanted to throw out there too, because now that Cam was saying that, it almost made me wish that there was a scene where this Flash Thompson got to meet Joe Meaning Dianello, as like, and he's like, "Oh, you're me from a different unit," like, and it's just this giant jack dude who's supposed to be a high schooler.
Yeah. Yeah. What was I gonna say? This also, of course, like now the Vulture doesn't know Peter Parker's identity anymore. And yet, like as we saw, like in the trailers before, like he's still in Morbius. So what's gonna happen there? And whatever.
Nobody's gonna see Morbius, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, very true. Yeah. Yeah.
I have tried to give Morbius my best effort to like want to see it, and I can't. I don't want to see that movie. It looks bad. It looks terrible.
That movie looks terrible.
Fair.
And Venom 2 was terrible, and so I know that Morbius is going to be terrible. And to quickly go back to Ed Hardy, like when he popped up, I was like disappointed.
Tom Hardy.
As somebody who's seen Venom 2, I don't want him in the MCU. Like I was like, when he gets like phased out of existence and goes back to his universe, I was like, amazing, perfect, thank you. This is the best thing they ever could have possibly did.
Yeah.
Although I love his so you're saying is there was
Tom Hardy.
Yeah, what I love though was so what you're saying is a billionaire flew around shooting laser beams out of his hand in a tin suit. I like that line. That was a good line.
Again, you throw a whole bunch of extra stuff in there. He just says like, so there was a billionaire in a tin suit, and this green guy, the Hulk, and you thought like whatever Protectors was a shit name because it is. Yeah. I mean, like it was the perfect amount of that nonsense for the MCU, and yeah,
and then we get a little bit of the
they're
Venom,
gone, and the Venom sticks around, and there was like in that vein, there was like especially once Peter and once the other Peter Parkers kind of get introduced, I was like, okay, so are they also gonna bring in Kirsten Dunst and Emma Stone? Like, are they going to pull those guys in? And like, obviously that would have complicated a whole bunch of other stuff for Andrew Garfield's arc and character stuff with Emma, if she'd been back. So I'm like ultimately okay that they don't. And they explain it away as like, you know, a few people slip through. It's not everybody that knows your identity and stuff. And that's why we don't get everybody, but people we do get, it's like, okay, cool. But there are just like, another kind of like continuity issue that we end up getting is like Electro didn't really know who Peter Parker was Spider-Man, but who cares? It's bringing Jamie Foxx into the fold, and he gets another crack at the character and has some fun with it. So we're gonna pretend that I'm not buck ass naked here, whatever. Like, and I love the Sandman's like, well, I am. Yeah, I'm gonna pretend that. I will say like, especially the Lizard, but I think the Lizard and Sandman, I think, get short shrift in terms of like the cool villain growth that we get from the other characters. And even I guess Electro doesn't have like he doesn't grow really much, but he does have a nice little scene with Andrew Garfield at the end of hoping that or thinking he was a black kid and hoping that there's a black Spider-Man out there. As a lovely little nod, of course. Um but yeah, like the Lizard and Sandman kind of almost being like such nothing characters that like they don't even they didn't even like bring the actors in really for like any live action stuff. They just kind of reused their footage from Spider-Man 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man. Uh and they like I think they've come out and said that it was basically like because it was cheaper to reuse that footage and kind of repurpose it than it would have been to like de-age them.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because Thomas Hayden Church, he's showing his age these days, and Reese Fonds, but still like cool that they're in there and they have like little beats and little like moments with these characters, and they kind of they work for an expositional perspective. Like they the fact that they're the two that survive among their respective movies, they can kind of tell the story of the other characters to make the other characters realize their fates. Um, so I appreciate that they were there,
I
even if I like it's one of those elements of like, oh, it would have been cool if they'd done more with them or something.
agreed.
Frank.
I definitely agree with some of that, and I do think they did a pretty good job of like repurposing the footage because I'm sure you could go do like breakdowns of like, okay, this is from this and this is from this, but like as somebody who's seen those movies multiple times, not necessarily recently, like I wasn't sitting there just being like, oh, I've seen that Sandman thing, like I've seen him try to drown Peter before. So I think they did it like really well.
Yeah.
And, the thing I wanted to throw out about those guys. I like that at first is like an ally to Peter because of the way that his story ended, where he kind of came back to the good side a little bit with it and kind of had to have that interaction with Peter. So I like when he shows up, he's like blocking those Electro's like lightning, and then he's like talking to Peter, and then like even for a while he's like super on board with trying to help them out. And, flips and kind of comes back because everything else is like happening the way he's being treated. So, and he's just like, I just want to go home. Like he still has that thing where he just wants to see his daughter.
Yeah. You got a little choppy there, but the gist I got was enjoying that Flint was pretty much on Peter's side right out the gate, and then ultimately kind of flips, but not like out of animosity towards Peter. It's just like he doesn't see Peter as the way home anymore. So yeah, I also appreciate that, and kind of yeah, because it like they all for the most part serve like the where those characters left off when we last saw them. In that same vein, I love that the going back to like the banter that we get between the Spider-Men does stay largely confined to like the adventures we know. So when Tobey Maguire's talking about oh, I fought an alien from space who's made of black goo. Obviously it's his venom, and then Tom Holland getting to talk about like fighting Thanos on Earth and in space, and everybody's like, whoa, wait, you've been to space? Like that's okay, cool. And then Andrew Garfield being like, man, I'm so lame. I just fought a rhino guy in a suit, like a Russian in a rhino suit. And right before we saw the movie, Frank, you mentioned like you really hope we didn't get Paul Giamatti coming back, and obviously I knew we weren't going to, but I knew he was going to get a little bit of nod, so I appreciated that moment, kind of for you. And then, but I also love like the the meta context that we also get of these movies of largely people kind of like look down on the Amazing Spider-Man movies, even though again I argue like Andrew Garfield I think is a great Spider-Man, great Peter Parker, even if he's too sexy or whatever. But the fact that they kind of do that, like, you're not lame, man. You're amazing. You are amazing is both like obviously a nod to the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but also to that like sentiment that like Andrew Garfield couldn't be like nerdy Peter Parker. He's too cool. um, is certainly a fun element of kind of them, bantering, talking up. I also love that like they are so used to being alone that they don't work well on a team at first. And we get that lovely moment with Tom Holland being like, I don't want to brag, but I'm going to. I'm on the Avengers. And Tobey Maguire being like, that's great. What is that? Yeah, is that a band? Are you in a band? Like, lovely banter there. And then like the three of them working in tandem, trusting their tingle and you know and all that. Like, and then we get the amazing shots that, again, like, shout out to the marketing, not like spoiling these elements, because like the three of them flying and then like webbing each other to like web and throw people farther and stuff, and then like flying through the air, and you kind of each get to land in their cool iconic poses and stuff like that, on the top of the Statue of Liberty nonetheless, is wonderful. I'm realizing I want to throw it over to kind of the Doctor Strangeness of the movie. We talked a little bit about kind of the introduction there. What do we think of the Spider-Man Doctor Strange fight sequence in the mirror dimension, Cameron?
It was awesome. It
Yeah.
was so fucking cool.
Oh yeah.
The moment Peter figures out, he goes, "Oh, it's just geometry. You're really good at geometry. You got this." And just like goes out and uses his webs to arrange things in the way that Doctor Strange has been controlling them and just moving them around. And it's such a cool scene to see Doctor Strange just like dominate the fight for so long until Peter like figures it out with his brain
Mhm.
and then does it to Doctor Strange and like hooks him up there. And then later Doctor Strange shows up and says, "I was suspended above the Grand Canyon for 12 hours.
Mhm.
And it's like perfect. It's so well done. Once again, like they absolutely kill it. And it's the
Mhm.
best. I love it.
They get the he takes the sling ring and Doctor Strange is like, ow, and then he gives it to Ned, and Ned discovers he has, you know, those latent magic abilities, which is the thing that I keep wanting to tweet, but I'm not going to tweet it because obviously for spoiler reasons or whatever. But I'm just like, man, Marvel knows how to use portals. Like, all of the big, most hype moments in recent years have seemingly involved Marvel's use of portals, from obviously Endgame and then now this, because like he, you know, does the whole like, I wish we could see Peter Parker, and you see it, and like when it first happened, and it's also like, I mean, just the timing of that sequence of the other Spider-Man coming in right after the death of Aunt May, which we'll talk about, you know, as well, was like great. And it's like, I love all three times I've seen it now, kind of the like levels of recognizability of what's happening in that moment when the first Spider-Man comes in, because like he turns and you see like the giant Amazing Spider-Man eyes. So if you recognize that from Amazing Spider-Man at that point, you pop a little bit. And then as he gets closer, you start to see that suit design, those people who didn't recognize the eyes but know that pop. And then obviously like he takes the thing off, and it's Andrew Garfield, and that like gets the biggest pop for the most kind of common moviegoers and stuff like that. And then yeah, again, the second one, like Peter Parker walks in, oh man, it's just some guy, like is a great other reveal, because that's exactly what like you know, what Ned would think in that moment. Also shout out to so are you gonna go into battle like dressed as a youth pastor, or do you have your suit? And he kind of just does the like, it's there underneath kind of nod.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Um, so going to the Aunt May death sequence, and just kind of the like that moment being in here. What do you guys think of that, and how that kind of like hits Peter, and kind of obviously we get iconic beats and moments in that. Frank, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love that scene a lot. Like, I think it's incredibly emotional, and I was definitely like sad to see her go, even though it's even kind of something we've seen before, and especially even if you read the comics and stuff like that, kind of definitely comes up kind of time and time again. But I still think this was incredibly well done, and it kind of almost reminded me a little bit of the Spider-Man game,
Mm-hmm.
and like how they kind of did it there, and how it was so done well. It was so well done there, and I love it there. And I even definitely love it here, and I even love that Happy shows up at the end. Like that somehow that definitely made it sadder to me that he's just kind of over there, and they're like arresting him, and he can't really like help or do anything. And I was like, that definitely like I think that whole scene definitely hits. And I also think the fight sequence before that is incredible. I know Willem Dafoe out here being an incredible badass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doing the flips and throwing Peter all over the place. Absolutely. What'd you think of the Aunt May stuff there, Cam?
This is probably the most controversial, like not controversial, but conflicting feelings I have for the film. And where like really my knit grit comes from for this, because I do like in a vacuum, Aunt May's death slash giving the great responsibility, one liner is great because she is the established like parental character at this point after 3 films. She is phenomenal. Marissa Tomei kills it in her delivery. Everything she does in that scene, the fact that she's been, pointing Peter to be that he needs to help people, not hurt people, has been just like such a great thing. But outside of that vacuum, something I will still fight tooth and nail for is when I watch Spider-Man Homecoming, there is another character that's not listed anywhere. It's not talked about, and it's the absence of that character being talked about that makes that character speak volumes. And that's Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm.
In Spider-Man Homecoming, in Civil War, Peter remarks why he's Spider-Man. And he says, because when people have the strength or like the power to help people and then choose not to, like sometimes people they care about get hurt, or a variation of that line rather. I paraphrased it poorly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That
that was the version of this: with great power comes great responsibility at that time. That was kind of like the sentiment came in that movie from that. And the illusion was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, we're meeting Peter at this point in his journey, and we didn't get the origin, we didn't get the spider bite, we didn't get the Uncle Ben moment.
Yeah, but the idea, and so whenever I've looked at like when he's going internal, when I mentioned earlier, like he has these moments that the other Spider-Men have in their films, we just aren't shown it, and the way that it's emphasized in his own like internal resolution coming out into that third act with strength and like being reinvigorated by his own personal determination. I've always seen that as like when he looks in the water and he's staring into his own eyes. In my mind, I have always heard some voice say, "With great power comes great responsibility." Like you can't, like it is up to you. You have to be the person that does this because you have the power to do so. And here's the thing: even if Uncle Ben never gave that line, there is so much about I love Marissa Tomei's Aunt May, not only just because I love Marissa Tomei, I've loved her since Weeds. She's always been like in my heart, as both an actress and as just like a goddess. Sorry, not Weeds. That's a different actress. I'm thinking of My Cousin Vinny. Sorry, very different film.
I was gonna say, I was like, I don't remember Marissa Tomei in Weeds, so I was just looking that up.
That's a different woman who also has my heart. No, Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny. Ever since I've seen that movie, I've just thought she was like the hottest thing to walk the planet Earth. Like if you want to see another incredible performance by her, watch that movie.
I mean, that's when she won the Oscar for. So yeah.
She's incredible.
Great movie. And she's like my favorite part of that whole movie.
Yeah, she's amazing. Just as a character, but also as an actor, is amazing. Enough of me just like doing nothing but praising Marissa Tomei. I love that there's a moment in Homecoming where Peter's lost the suit. Iron Man took it back, and he's had to go home. In tourist.
In the same shirt we end up seeing kind of him in this movie.
Yeah. And he's like that situation is fantastic. That the callback to that is fantastic. But when in that he comes home and Aunt May is furious. She's livid. She's almost in tears. She's so upset. And she might call like this panic. That panic comes from trauma. Like that little panic, it's like kids being out in New York, whatever, like he's old enough to whatever. That kind of reaction And I hear a lot of people like harp on her performance in Homecoming, being like, it's weird that she's so overreactive. Moment. I'm like, she's overreactive because in her mind, she's thinking the last time somebody didn't call me to let me know where they were and they weren't home on time, I didn't think anything about it. And then he died. Like in my mind, that's always kind of been the thing. So like the absence of Uncle Ben in these films has always been in Homecoming, he's very much a presence and a character in my mind when I watch that film. And once again, this is deeply into my own interpretation, of course. I've never talked to people who wrote or directed it to ask if it was intentional or not. On the flip side of that, Far From Home is one of my least favorite Spider-Man movies. I think it has some of the coolest moments, but as far as like it's hard to get me to care about Spider-Man stories when Spider-Man's not in New York. When Spider-Man is playing tourist hero and like playing on that global scale, I'm just not as big of a fan. But coming back into this film, Marissa Tomei being a domineering and in control character who's badass and awesome. Aunt May is just absolutely fantastic. For her to be the one to give the with great power comes great responsibility line. Like, does it work? Yeah, it works. It's fine. More than fine, actually. Like, I definitely, if you're like, did she earn it? 100% more than that. She's earned that line. I just wish she had I wish she had her own. I wish it was her own and she didn't need to have Uncle Ben's. That's really what it comes down to.
So it's interesting because the history of that line is actually like the original incarnation of it is what she says in this movie of it's not the with great power comes great responsibility. Like it was the with great power there must also be great responsibility, and that wasn't said by anybody the first time it appeared in the comics.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
it was like a caption. It wasn't attributed to Uncle Ben
until
the first movie, really.
That's accurate. You're 100% correct. People today don't understand that.
Yeah.
That a majority of the things that they think are typical Spider-Man or like iconically Spider-Man aren't actually said by any character in the Spider-Man comics.
Yeah.
It's not, it is, they have been Stan Lee's words captioned onto the page.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the difference. That is the massive difference between the two. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have an issue with that. Like I said, I love Aunt May. I love Marissa Tomei's Aunt May. And if you are asking me if she quote unquote earned it, one, I don't think she needed to earn it. You can write and have a character so whatever lines you want. But I think what she has written on her tombstone in this film,
mm-hmm.
I think is way more poignant and way more Aunt May as a character than kind of this like old school line of with great power there must also come great responsibility.
Yeah.
That's like saying that phrase feels a little archaic and doesn't feel as impactful. Well, I shouldn't say it was definitely impactful. Her entire scene in that moment was crazy emotional. But when it comes down to it, I just think that we did not ever need that in this trilogy. Because it had already been said without being said in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it worked that it hadn't been said up to this point. I think it works in the context of this movie to connect him to the other Peter Parkers when they come in.
I agree.
Like it is like now they all have that is a nexus point that somebody tells Peter with great power comes great responsibility, and it effectively almost turns this movie into this Peter Parker's origin story. Especially with where we kind of end the movie with of him basically on his own, broke in the in the apartment, nobody knows who he is, kind of thing. It's effectively a reset for the character and what we've had up to this point. And I'll be very curious to talk to Logan about this when he eventually sees the movie, because I know one of his issues with the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies has been that Tom Holland has never felt like your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because from the off, he gets a $1 billion suit from Tony that like has all the tech and has all the gadgets and stuff like that. Um, and I can see that point. And so it was basically like the first couple movies effectively now and Civil War and his other appearances and stuff almost act as like a proto Spider-Man. And now that he's suffered that tragic loss, and there was probably some sense of tragic loss with Uncle Ben too, but just like in the the PS4 Spider-Man game, like we don't see the Uncle Ben scene, like because he's been Spider-Man for years in that game, but we do get like the relationship between him and Aunt May and stuff, and I think it works there as well, just like it works here. I also think because we've had 3 movies with Marissa Tomei, there is a deeper connection to that character versus the Uncle Bens that we get from their respective franchises are in their
100%.
movie for like 20 minutes before the moment we know is going to happen happens. And so so I love even how they kind of play with that in this of like she gets taken out and then she gets back up and just kind of like laughs it off and he knocked me on my ass, but like, and so you don't know she's gonna go down right away. Like once she kind of delivers the lines, like "uh-oh," that's
And when she
basically
said that, it's like,
basically a death
oh,
knell.
yeah,
And to like to know to expect that. Um,
yeah,
this franchise's like relation with Uncle Ben, I think like obviously originally long before they had the plans to do this movie that would tie kind of all these franchises together, what like the original sentiment was we've seen that twice, we don't need to see that again. We do, like
yeah.
it can be inferred from that line from Civil War, or it can be inferred from those kind of yeah, like the hole that Ben Parker has left in their lives in Homecoming works. As it is, like there was we talked a little bit about What If as we were kind of leaving the theater. The zombies episode of What If basically makes the first mention of Uncle Ben. Like Peter says something about his Uncle Ben in What If, and that's like the first introduction of Uncle Ben canonically in the MCU version of events. Um, so he theoretically was around and maybe does. We talked like there was a lot of conversation we had around like the fact that it's May's plot alone and we don't see like an Uncle Ben headstone there. But we also like it's a very close up shot, so he could have been like in the next plot over or something like that, and it
And we
just
also talked about it because I came home. I've been thinking a lot about that actually,
mhm,
and it reminded me that like I think a lot of people assume that married couples will always have a plot next to each other,
mhm.
but that's especially for the working class and the poor. That's definitely not true.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, like, and I didn't even realize it, but my grandparents, like, they're buried next to each other now, but that's only because my grandmother had his body and tombstone moved.
mm,
Like she moved states from where he was buried, and like that's an expensive process. The exhumation of a casket, and a tombstone, and having it moved, and buying like 2 plots, one that you leave empty until you pass, and the other being filled with that person. So I'm familiar with both joint tombstones, like having both parties on there, as well as separate ones next to each other, or even shared plots.
mhm.
But I also know that like if there's a big gap in between time and you don't own both plots, the other plot's getting sold.
Yeah. I mean, that was what
Like,
we joked about
yeah,
beforehand is like Uncle Ben theoretically died before the blip, and there was probably quite a few burials that happened during those 5 years
yeah.
that ultimately may not have been needed, but so
But so
anyway,
that
there's
like
like
yeah,
any
there's
number of
yeah.
reasons, but the it is interesting that they never addressed it head on, and maybe it still leaves the door open for a flashback scene in the future that we will eventually get. Who knows? But
Also, it makes her fleeing with Happy less dramatic or like devastating because now she's with Ben.
yeah, there's that.
Like, yeah.
That's
Poor
it. Like,
Happy, poor Happy, oh, poor Happy.
yeah, I do appreciate that. Like, we get introduced to Happy in this movie with like him in tears because she's breaking up with him, which obviously was like set up in Far From Home's
Yeah.
in one of the teasers there. Um, But yeah, just so many like great moments throughout this film, and again, like even if elements of this get spoiled, the back and forth that these characters have with one another, the like uh Ned asking Tobey Maguire, Peter Parker, so do you have a best friend? And him being like, yeah, I did. He died in my arms after he tried to kill me. It was devastating, and
Or it was
like it
heartbreaking,
was
and he like
heartbreaking,
is and he's doing sinus, so he's like it's
it's
very
just
stoic.
yeah, and Ned just kind of like sits with that, and then like the callback to it later of like when he's like bragging about he's magic now, like, but I promise I will not become a supervillain and become your arch nemesis or something. And Andrew Garfield just gives him like a pat on the shoulder. It's just
Yeah.
a great little like capstone for that. And I mean, like, I guess the last little beat within the movie before we dive into like what we think is going to happen in the future is what do we think of this movie's ending of they basically have to cast the spell so that nobody remembers who Peter is. Frank, what are your thoughts on kind of where Peter's story ends this time around?
I think it's interesting because they have a lot I think they could go from here. Like there's a lot of different directions they could try to take him and the universe and a lot of those characters. I kind of like some of it of just wiping the slate clean, especially because it is like it is incredibly sad, and they still have the potential to bring some of these characters back later. Like if they are able to do the thing where he's able to like break through to them, or even if he never breaks through and they get the old memories back, they can just go on and get together and make new memories. But I think for what I think they're going to do, like if I had to think about like what I would assume they would probably go with is I think the other Spider-Men are probably just kind of gone from here. Like I love your pitch of kind of bringing them and doing things, kind of continuing some of the things and even giving Garfield the ending he never like got to get. But I, I think those guys will probably just kind of be rode off into the sunset with this movie, and then I think it'll probably just be Tom Holland is like a more traditional kind of Spider-Man. I think going forward because now, kind of like we talked about, where this is almost like his origin. Like they have everything now for Spider-Man. Like he can go just take on villains, and you can definitely introduce more members of it, the Sinister Six, that are actually like in his universe, and you could even I think it would even be cool to. I don't necessarily want them to like redo stuff, but it'd be cool if he meets like the versions of his universe of those characters. Like if he meets like Octavius, or if he meets like Osborn. But even though they kind of said Osborn's not in his universe, but you guys get what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
Well, they never said Osborn's not in this universe. Oscorp doesn't exist, and it's
That's
clear
true,
that
yeah.
if, in my mind, it's possible that Harry's dead, which is why Norman's devastated.
I mean, I read that more as like he can't find his son. He couldn't find his life in this universe, and there might be another Norman Osborn somewhere out there. But like he went to his house looking for his life.
Yeah, that's true.
And couldn't find it. Couldn't find Harry. And also, conveniently writes out James Franco from not.
Don't have to worry about him anymore. It's like he's mentioned twice, but that's all we're gonna need of him.
Yeah.
Even though Norman's costume, like after like the fight and the modifications to it, look very similar to James Franco's one.
Mm-hmm.
Although I just love it. There's so much about that ending that I just think is perfect. One, and this is I was talking about it to my brother-in-law. The next so like he's clearly going to be focusing on being Spider-Man. Like he's not graduating from high school because technically his high school doesn't know he exists.
Yeah, so like he's got the GED test there.
Yeah, he has like the GTA, the GED test book there, prep test. And then on top of that, you also see that he's dedicated himself to being Spider-Man. And I think it would be super cool that in the next film, that we get Black Cat introduced, because Black Cat is a character that is not a love interest for Peter Parker. She's a love interest of Spider-Man's. And it'd be cool to see him being focused on being Spider-Man, which is kind of inverting that expectation of a Spider-Man story where it's about, having to choose, like being torn between the two lives and needing to find balance or choosing one. And instead of that being flipped, being like, being all in on being Spider-Man is not healthy. You need to also be who you are as Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be the conflict with him and Black Cat, because Black Cat is constantly in costume. Like, she is who she is. Felicia Hardy is Black Cat all the time. It's not like a split between two lives. And so I think that would be super cool.
Yeah, I mean, because theoretically, also MJ and Ned are off to MIT. They're off to Boston, and we did identify that yes, there is wicked crime in Boston for Peter Parker to fight if he needs to. But I mean, you imagine Peter's going to stay in that new apartment he's renting in New York, doing the crime. And yeah, I love the look of that suit. Obviously, we don't get like a ton of great looks of it, but like just the sheen of the blue on it in particular, I was like, yes, I can't wait to see this in the next iteration.
Very much inspired by his Spider-Man counterparts.
Yeah.
Because they both have the vibrant blue that we've not seen in Tom's suits outside of the jacket, the sweat jacket that he has in his early days. And seeing him like wear a traditional Spider-Man suit is quite fantastic.
That he sews himself. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. It almost sparkles too, which is great. It's reflective.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I like, obviously my pitch of like each Spider-Man getting their own continuation of the story. As much as I would love that, I don't think we're actually going to get that. So for where this Peter Parker leaves off, I mean, I fully expect him to take a job working for J. Jonah Jameson to take pictures of Spider-Man in the next movie.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes.
And doing that to, pay the bills, pay the rent. I like, the rumors were that before I think they landed on this storyline for this movie, were that Kraven the Hunter was going to be a villain. And I think that would make a suitable villain for now that like the world doesn't know who Spider-Man is. It's a challenge for Kraven the Hunter to come in and figure it out. And I'll be curious to see how they approach that character and how they try and make him a character that works within this world.
Not just a character that work. I think that character could easily work in this more high-tech world. Because the idea is Kraven the Hunter is an apex man. Like, he is at the top peak of efficiency for everything, and he hunts down creatures with his own strength. But that could easily be done here. Because I think that's like, there's tons of characters that are like that here in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I will just say, like, the one of the animated versions that I've watched and done that D Plus show on had Kraven the Hunter as the bad guy, and he was basically hosted his own like wildlife reality show, hunting Spider-Man. And so like that's kind of more, I'm curious if they will do some kind of like twist like that on the character as opposed to just like evil, because we get in the myriad of like people starting to come through, we do get like a Kraven and the Hunter silhouette kind of in there at one point. We see some scorpions, we see some rhino, we see, I think, a black cat is in there somewhere. So like they're definitely teasing the other characters in Spider-Man's collective. But I'd also be curious if they circle back to and bring like Miles into this universe. He's kind of been established that like we had Aaron Davis introduced in that first in the first one as like with the Prowler kind of moniker and stuff. So maybe we see this Peter Parker now take like somebody under his wing and kind of almost get like another Spider-Verse kind of flavored story.
It'd be cool
in one of these coming. So and doing that can set up, much like so much of the MCU right now is kind of setting up the next generation of the MCU. We can get kind of the next generation of Spider-Man, even though like this Spider-Man obviously still very young looking, and I'm sure like Tom Holland could absolutely play the character for quite some time if he chooses to.
He said that if they because his contract was up for this one. But he has stated openly, like, because he got asked finally after the movie came out, and like, are you because he doesn't want to, he's not allowed to talk about it at all because he's Tom Holland and spoiled Avengers for people. But in this case, it is he has mentioned publicly he wants to come back and be Spider-Man again. Yeah. So
I mean, I've seen that. I've seen like reports of like there's another trilogy kind of in the works. I've seen him also come out and say like he would love to see like Miles enter and kind of take the spotlight as a new Spider-Man as well. So yeah, it'll be
Cool,
curious to see where we go from there.
cool bits about contracts and stuff. Apparently, Willem Dafoe was brought back on this one, not only just because they want Willem Dafoe back as Green Goblin, but apparently in the first Spider-Man movie, his contract had an option clause that they could call him back for later sequels,
Mm-hmm.
and so they Sony pulled that. Like they said, you're still on hook for your option for
Okay.
the seminal 2001 film Spider-Man that you made 20 years ago.
I mean, well, he was in the other two as well as like voice performances. So
Yeah, voice performances as well as physical performance in 3.
yeah.
Oh, and in 2, because he's in the mirror yelling at James Franco. Yeah, so he was in all 3 of them. So, but he's still optioned to be a part of the Spider-Man films going forward. But apparently this one closed the gap. So he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. But he mentioned in an interview, he was, yeah, this is like the longest option I've ever heard of. Somebody like making good on.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
good on, but also good on him. Like, oh man, everybody's performances was just absolutely stellar, top notch. That's my conclusion. This is an incredible movie. Go watch it.
Yeah. Any final thoughts there from you, Frank?
But yeah, no, I mean, I agree with a ton of what Cam said there. Like, I think he kind of nailed it. But everybody in this movie is amazing. Like, all the villains are great. All the heroes are great. I definitely really love the villains and a lot of their performances because they've been great in the past movies. But getting to see them all bounce off each other, and especially like I thought Jamie Foxx does great in this movie, but I liked him even from before. But he actually gets a lot more to work with here, and especially like even some of it is like more comic accurate costume, with like the mask that kind of shows up at the end, which is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then like Cam said, I basically just recommend everybody go see it because I think it's like probably one of the best superhero movies ever made for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely up there in like the probably top 5 of my favorites at this point. I still, as I kind of said, like I see Into the Spider-Verse still kind of taking the number 1 spot overall, but like they learned the right lessons from Into the Spider-Verse for this movie, I think. And we did get to have those great moments of callbacks of these characters across their generation, seeing like just little small things like Peter, like Tobey Maguire, like, and Doc Ock kind of getting to like reconnect after all these years and stuff, with like both of them in a good place and stuff. So many like lovely little bits like that. I think that, I mean, like we said earlier, the like one of the highlights of the movie easily is Andrew Garfield getting to save MJ and just like the like relief on his face when we get that moment is so beautiful and so lovely. And I'm very much looking forward to it. It's, the last little bits we get of the movie are, that heartbreaking tragedy of like Peter not being able to have it all, because Peter never gets to have it all. And making the decision to not come and find his friends. Oh, also, like, obviously like the goodbyes that he gets with everybody, I thought were lovely. The back and forth of Mr. Strange throughout the movie of call me Steven, call me sir, call me Steven, was a nice little like button for that character. Him getting to in character and then also just as Tom Holland to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, like thank them for kind of like laying the groundwork and kind of set the stage for him was a lovely moment. And then like his goodbyes with
I love
Ned
that
and
so much because
yeah, go ahead, Frank.
so I was just gonna throw in there on that. Like I love that moment so much because he like is struggling to find the words, but then there's just that thing where they kind of look at him and they're like, "It's what we do."
Yep.
And I was like, and that's like the most Spider-Man thing that like that has ever been said in like a movie where they're like, "Yeah, it's just what we do."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I love that so much.
Yeah. And then the goodbyes to Ned and Mary Jane and like, or not Mary Jane, MJ, with MJ saying the I love you and like don't say it to me like when you find me again, and then him making the decision. He sees his friends are doing well, they're safer without him. Like he sees the bandage on her head and like makes the decision to not tell her, is like so brutal And I just like, it's that thing of like, I want you to, I want a happy ending for Peter, and we just don't get it, but we do get that, you know, he's going to continue his adventures. And so, yeah, maybe those adventures continue on in the future with a Gwen Stacy or a Black Cat stepping in for a time. Who knows? But yeah, lots of real good stuff here in No Way Home. And I very much look forward to seeing where we go from here. And, you know, obviously I think John Watts, the director here, did a great job continuing on his, I think his next project is the Fantastic Four. Peter Parker obviously has a long running connection, or Spider-Man has a long running connection to the Fantastic Four. So maybe he'll pop up in that movie as well as others. There are obviously other elements of the universe. You know, he could team up with Daredevil in a thing. And so, yeah, we will see where they go from here. But I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, and I mean, obviously, the symbiote is also kind of the most like tangible, like next step potential. So we'll see where that goes moving forward. So that is gonna do it for this spoiler cast of Spider-Man: No Way Home. Thank you guys for joining me to watch the movie this morning, as well as sit down here and chat about it. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cameron?
Yeah. Want to give a massive shout out to MC University over with our friends Points in Progress. If you like if you like Marvel films and you want a cool recap, it's hosted by Mario Rivera and our good friend Sly. They are hosting it over there, and it is, I've only caught one episode so far, but so far it seems pretty fantastic. And of course, anything we can do to support our friends in the industry, you know, want to give them that shout out. So there you go.
Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, I'll just totally second Cam's plug there. I think that's a super fun shout out, and especially with, you know, we love our friends over there and the MCU, so I think I'll just second that.
Cool. You follow me at Trevor Day Starkey. I will third that shout out, and I'll also give a shout out to that D Plus show, which we've been doing as our holiday month of stuff. Most recently, Logan and I sat down and talked Jingle All the Way, so you can go check that out. Still need to figure out what we're going to do for this week's episode, but maybe I will say screw it and we're done with the holiday stuff and we'll just do the Hawkeye season finale. Who knows?
It's still holiday.
It's still holiday, yeah. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, give us 5 stars on Spotify or iTunes, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.